Step into Mind Matters, where we reveal the high-stakes world of CEOs, from their first-day jitters to game-changing strategies, and equip you with invaluable insights and practical advice essential for your personal growth and leadership journey. And now, Mind Matters.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Kendall Raessler, and today we're thrilled to have a remarkable guest on our podcast. He brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise as the CEO of Luminus Financial. Get ready for an engaging and informative episode as we welcome George De La Rosa to our show. Welcome, George. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Kendall.
This is fantastic, George. I'm so glad that you could be here. You have a wealth of knowledge and expertise that I do want to share with everybody. But before I jump into the questions, if you could give us a brief bio of your background, where you started, how you got into it, and bring us up to today quickly so we can have the listeners understand what is happening in your journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity because this June, actually, I'll be celebrating 30 years in the credit union industry. Yeah, so I wanted to get into accounting, and they sent me through a co-op program to the credit union that was attached to the Scarborough Educational System at the time, Sequel Credit Union. So I started to do my co-op placement there. And after I graduated high school, they offered me part-time work while I was going to college and university. So yeah, it's going to be 30 years this June that I started working officially in the credit union system.
That's awesome. You're the oldest guy that we have that we've had on the show as far as age and time in the industry. So that's awesome. You were also noticed as the youngest CEO in Canada in the credit unions as well. Were you not?
Yeah, so back in 2005, when I started at Star News Credit Union at the time, we rebranded to Luminus Financial, where I'm still the CEO. Back then, yeah, I was one of the youngest CEOs in Canada in the credit union system.
That's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations on that. And that's fantastic because I want to take you back to your first day. I know that's a number of years to remember, but I want to take you back to that because we have a bunch of listeners that are brand new CEOs. CEOs have been doing it for a while and some that have been almost as long as you. And I want to share the experience to our listeners, what it was like. What were you going through? What was your, feeling like, oh my goodness, welcome, George, you're the CEO. There's a lot of plates to spin, a lot of things to learn, a lot to do. What was that like? Give me your emotional side first, please.
In all honesty, the very first phone call I did, and it was probably a few days into the job, was to my really close friend at the time. And I said, what the hell did I get myself into?
Yeah.
And it was because at the time, you aspire to be a CEO and you want to get to that level. But when you're actually sitting in that role and you start to realize that you're responsible, especially as a credit union CEO, you're responsible for your members' money. You're responsible that this financial institution that has been in existence for 50 years at the time needs to continue on for another 50 years. So you want to make sure that it's viable. You're responsible for the jobs of all the employees and their families that count on those employees working there and all this stuff, right? So all of that responsibility coming onto your shoulders was just this one thing that kind of, shook me for a bit. And my friend at the time said, listen, you have dreamed of this for so long. Now just do it.
That is good advice. It's easier said than done, but that is an awful pressure put on. So I understand a little bit more on your emotional side, but let's talk about what your business side was thinking when you first get in there, because as a brand new CEO, you've got your board on your left hand that has got these goals and measures that you want to put in place. You've got a team behind you that you are new to, are learning about. How did you handle your team? What was your first thoughts on your culture and how to handle your culture of your team?
I've always been a big proponent that, you do as you want others to do for you, right? So, I have been blessed to be able to do almost every role within the credit union system. So if I'm asking a member service representative to make sure that they're serving the member with a smile, it's something that I've done myself. If I'm asking an accounting person to make sure that the balance sheet is balanced and the income statement is working, I've done that as well myself, right? So in that regard, when it came to my team, I think coming in as a young CEO and managing people that had been in the industry longer than I had been born at the time, being able to come in with the fact that I had done that role and understood how to do their role and give them tips on how to do it better.
Yeah.
That sort of, I think people were, I want to say inspired, but maybe they just appreciated that, right? When it came to my board, the board of directors were actually very in tune with what was going on in the industry. We were a credit union that were serving employees of Toronto Star. They knew that in 5, 10 plus years, the industry and the employees of that industry was going to start to decline. So they needed a fresh new face, a fresh new eye of this credit union for the members. And so with my marketing background, to be able to come in there and rebrand the organization to bring it forward, I think was very key. And so remembering that and remembering the reason why they hired me and being able to continue to have those discussions at the board table was important for me because we had a task to complete.
That's wise words, very wise words. Did you have any mentors helping you throughout the way? Did you surround yourself with mentors to help you out? Because there's a lot of challenges, a lot of things that even though you grew up in the credit union doing your work throughout it, there's always tasks and tribulations that come forward to you. So is there any mentors that helped you all the way? Can you explain to our listeners a little about that?
Oh, absolutely. There was individuals that had been in the credit union system, as I mentioned, that longer than I had been born at the time. And so seeing how they became successful in the industry was important to me. And having those sort of friendships and being able to call them up and ask them questions, had you ever dealt with this? So there was a previous CEO of a credit union. There were individuals that had done sales and marketing, rebranding of credit unions. There were member relations individuals that worked for our central at the time. So being able to make sure that you have that good network was important for me. And I think the other big thing, and I'm still a big proponent of this, is making sure that there's a network of smaller credit union CEOs that you could bounce ideas off.
Mm-hmm. That's very wise. Birds of a feather flock together, as that old saying goes.
Yeah.
There must have been a challenge, and I'm going to guess, and maybe there is or there isn't, and you'll let us know. But I know that a lot of young CEOs, when they're working, and there's an age gap where the people below them are a lot older. And now you get put into that. There's some animosity that comes from that. And that affects your culture, that affects your growth, that affects your leadership. How did you weed those challenges out if you had those challenges?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, one of the individuals that was working at the credit union that I became the CEO of, had applied for the role and didn't get it. So, working with that individual was interesting as well. But for me, as I mentioned earlier, do unto others as you want them to do unto you, right? So I treat people with respect. I've done the roles, so I'm not asking you something that I wouldn't have done myself or would do myself. I think that's important. There's been instances, of course, where it has been challenging, but in the credit union system, we're all about listening to your stakeholders. And that, of course, is your board of directors, is your staff, and of course, your members. So being able to also listen and come up with solutions to the problems, I think has been another thing that I've always been a big proponent of.
I've heard the open door method where you listen and you hear and you take that in and then follow up with what you said, the golden rule. I'm using a lot of old adages today for some reason, but the golden rule, do unto others as you have them do unto you, is a great way to show and to lead people. When you were looking at a product and you were deciding that you wanted to change a product, you said you rebranded. That's a huge product change. It's more than a product. It's the whole company change. What was the deciding piece that had you push that way? Because that's a risky piece as well, George, doing that, because that puts it all on you.
Yeah, and I don't know if many of your listeners would know this, but in the credit union industry, especially in Canada, you had a lot of closed bond credit unions and open bond credit unions. Closed bond meaning you service a specific employer group or a specific community. And so for us, it was the newspaper industry at the time. Knowing that that industry was going to potentially decline in the near future, we needed to be able to shift over to open bond. And but that didn't mean be everything to everyone. We still had that niche mentality. And so being able to come up with products and services that address a niche need is important, because we're not large enough to be able to be as competitive or be out there in the media as some of the larger financial institutions. So being able to listen to your stakeholders and know what is a need that is not being met at the current instant of other financial institutions and coming up with solutions, I think has been a big thing for us that has helped us be successful.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm looking and saying, in your hindsight, what advice would you give a new CEO that was coming into your role on day one? What hindsight, what would you look at and say to him or her?
Ooh, that's a great question. Even to this day, I always say that not everything that has been done in the past will work in the future. So always be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. We've seen so many shifts in various different industries, right? Like someone was saying the story at a conference that I was at a couple of weeks ago on how Netflix actually got created, right? And why it was created. And it was just an individual that got upset at Blockbuster, So however things were done in the past is not how they're going to be maybe done in the future. So always be open to new ideas.
That's some great advice, because when we talk about people and we look at being a CEO and you're wanting to scale, you're wanting to grow your company, the people that you've talked about maybe did it the old way, where they had to walk into a bank as an example. And where today that is getting less and less and less, where people want to walk into the bank. But you also have your people that you're working with that were used to working 9 to 5 at the bank every time. And now with the new world that's happened, if I can call it that, we see people working at a home more, different balances, and they have different attitudes, different beliefs. The school of hard knocks, where we just hit it and get it done, isn't how it works anymore. How did you handle that challenge, George?
Interesting that you say that, because we were working from home before it became cool to work from home, or it was required, right? We had that ability. So again, being open to new ideas. You're right, because I remember even myself working through the industry. You were expected to be there 9 to 5 type of thing, and in a certain clothing and and all this other stuff, right? So for us, being able to be flexible, that ability for individuals to work from home, and myself, I'm a big networker. I like to attend networking events. I like to develop business in that way. I like to promote the credit union industry in that way. So I used to need to travel a lot or go to different conferences. So being able to have the ability to bring my laptop with me or other tools to be able to do work while I'm not sitting at my desk was important. And then look at this, 2020, you needed to turn it on. You had credit unions that had never, ever had an employee work from home. And so they had to scramble. And, because we'd been doing it for a while, we were able to provide resources and tools for other smaller credit union CEOs on how to do that.
Well, technology plays, and that's wise, and I'm glad you're able to help everybody. And technology plays a really big part in us moving forward and giving us that. But it also creates a challenge. The days when you get a pager, when you could never ever hide, never have a time off, and it's not that you want to hide, but it's a matter of you needing some work-life balance. George, how do you handle work-life balance with spinning so many plates? Because a lot of our CEOs are stuck in a position that they're running 100 miles an hour and 16 hours a day. Maybe it's necessary, maybe it's not. How do you handle work-life balance?
People always ask me this because, they look at me and they say, you're not stressed out. Like, I would expect you to be so stressed out and on edge all the time. I love what I do. I love being able to provide solutions for our members. I love seeing our credit union be successful. I love working with my team that I have. But I do also love my family. I have a 6-year-old daughter. So being able to, take that time and be with her, is important, right? So, it doesn't mean that I'm off the grid all the time, but when I can be, I take my time with her, and I enjoy those moments because that's what brings me joy.
Yes, life is a balance of everything, and we found that some CEOs put it all into one jar, and some separate it into individual jars. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's what works best for both. It's nice when you love your work so much that it doesn't feel like work. It feels like excitement, and that's what I hear and see from you.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about scaling next. Mm-hmm. So you're now CEO, you've been running for a while, you got your team, which you had, but you built it up even more. What strategies do you employ to scale your organization, whether it's expanding geographically or if it's in terms of services and products? Like I know you did the rebrand, and I will talk about that in a bit, but what other products, like how did you approach that, Jordan?
Back in 2005, when I came in, it was a very small organization, right? It was very it was old school, as you could say, old school credit union, right? And then, you fast forward to 2010 or so when we needed to rebrand. One of the things that we started to do, or one of the many things, was making sure that we had, policies and procedures and features that were larger than our organization. Yes, we're small, but we were thinking like a bigger organization. And with that ability, it gave us the opportunity to be able to talk to other credit unions that perhaps didn't have the ability to work from home, didn't have certain policies or procedures or certain products available. We had the ability for other credit unions to join us. And that was the start of us being able to have other smaller credit unions come to the Luminus Financial brand, because they didn't have certain mobile apps, they didn't have certain banking system features, they didn't have certain products, they didn't have the brand or even the social media presence, etc. So we've been able to have at least 5 or 6 credit unions join us, and that plus being open bond and being able to create products and services for niche organizations that had nothing to do with who we were as the employees of the credit union for employees of Toronto Star was also important for us to be able to scale.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you were scaling it, how did you keep the core values and the missions in line? Because as you know, you're scaling, those get played with and tossed left and right. What was your strategy there?
This episode is powered by Honest AI. Honest's optimized onboarding process and minimized documentation result in an expedited and seamless financing journey for clients, enhancing their contentment and commitment. Through identity verification, financial data validation, and creditworthiness assessment, our software empowers companies to make well-informed financing choices, bolster application speed and customer uptake by 30%, and cut operational costs by a significant 70% with Honest AI. For more information, visit honest.ai.
Really remembering why credit unions were created. Our mission is to be able to serve underserved markets, families, businesses in Ontario, and individuals. And so that is at the core of why credit unions were created. And being able to remember that and come up with products and services that are serving those underserved markets. I talked about this a few weeks ago with someone else online. And, in this rate environment that we're at, a lot of self-employed individuals are having a hard time finding financing because of the different inabilities that some financial institutions have in approving their mortgages. So for us is being able to come up with a financial solution that gives them the ability to be approved for a mortgage was important. And that is an underserved market, and that is a niche product for us. And so we spend the time to be able to come up with tools and solutions for these individuals.
So you go deep into your clients and listen and learn. and then you'll go from there. And then your team buys in. That's what I just heard. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, and it's not just the team, it's the board of directors as well. I mean, the strategy comes from them and senior management. But yes, filtering that down to your team, but also working with various different regulatory bodies to make sure that you are meeting all of those requirements as well, right? I think that that's important, because they're also stakeholders in your industry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, they are. It's very important. Well, what we touched on it a bit earlier, George. What role does technology play in scaling your process? How have you leveraged it and enhanced efficiencies and customer/member experiences?
Yeah, it's very useful because we're a credit union that services individuals across Ontario, but we only have 2 locations. So being able to have discussions virtually with members, being able to have documents signed electronically, being able to be almost a paperless organization is important. Having the tools like a tablet or a cell phone, is important to be able to service people that are not going to be able to come to your locations.
So with technology comes 2 sides, George. One side is it's helpful, just like you explained. And then there's another thing called ChatGPT. I know I'll bring that up. Everyone talks AI. They use big words. They say big things about it. But it also creates challenges, and it creates documents like notice of assessments, T4s, that it can be created, which creates fraud. Is that a concern for you in today's world?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so being able to have various levels of audits is important. But going back to, for ourselves, being able to have personal relationships with our members is number one. Credit unions have been number one in customer service for decades, and that's because of that personal relationship. So although someone is applying virtually and through an app or through the internet, we still will pick up the phone and talk to that individual. We still would like to have that virtual ability to see the member and build a relationship with them. Because if you just go everything 100% online, how are you going to be able to confirm certain things?
It's very difficult. Yes, it's in today's world. And a lot of institutions are having that trouble. They don't know. And to ask their people to look at something, how do you know what my signature looks like? It honestly changes every time because my handwriting is very messy. So it's difficult to train those people, and you have to put those procedures into place, which makes a lot of sense. When I listen to you change from, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here, George, when I listen to you change from the newspaper world, if I can say it that way, that was your main customer, there's where you're coming from. And then you had the forethought, the sight to move forward and to go outside of just that area. That is, after 50 some years, that is a huge change. And not only a cultural change, but it's also more weight to put onto your shoulders when you're doing that. Did you ever have a moment where you sat there and went, oh crap, is this right?
Oh, absolutely.
And when you had that self-doubt, which I figured you would, when you had that how did you handle it? Because so many CEOs get told so many things and they work really, really, really hard to it, and they make a decision outside of the box to find out it was right. Sometimes it was wrong. Mm-hmm. How do you handle it? Because I would imagine you would have made 2 types of them like that before.
I mean, and it's not even self-doubt, right? It's when you are coming into an industry that has been around since 1908, and it was very, savings and loans type of organizations, and you now are creating new products for, let's say, a new industry like the cannabis industry, or dealers in virtual currencies, or other types of high-risk businesses, or even self-employed individuals where sometimes you have to rework their income. Being able to think about all the potential risks and how you mitigate those risks is important, because you will have questions from other stakeholders, you will have questions from your board, you will have questions from your team, you will have questions from regulatory bodies. So being able to learn how to implement risk mitigating factors, I think is important. And if you've thought of all of those, maybe you can rest a little bit easier, but you can't think of everything, right? And so also being nimble enough to adjust going forward to reduce risk is also something that I think has helped us.
Those are fantastic words to give forward to our listeners. And I want to thank you so much for your time today, Georgia. We only had half an hour. It went by way too fast. I would love to ask you many more questions, and maybe we can get you back to another episode as well on this. So thank you very much for joining us on Mind Matters. I'll speak for our audience when I say you have a wealth of knowledge that you've given to us and expertise. And the best part is, it all came from your heart and who you are. So thank you very much for showing that to us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next time on Mind Matters.